Welcome to the demonstration video on budget and funder mapping in the TB module of Integrated Health Tool for Planning and Costing, referred to from now on as IHT. This video provides an overview of how to use the budget and funder mapping functionality of the tool. This function allows users to present cost results according to any results categories that the user wishes to define. Users can also identify funding sources for different cost categories, enabling the generation of results which show budgets by funder and the remaining resource gap. Budget and funder mapping is found in the Costing section of the tool. The Manage Budgets section is used to identify the different budget maps that you want to have, up to a maximum of 10 different budget maps. Each will sum to the same total cost, but will distribute the costs across the different categories in each budget map. There are optional default budget maps available, including Global Fund Application categories, WHO TB data reporting, National Strategic Plan for TB, and a customizable one. The Global Fund and WHO TB data reporting maps have a preliminary default mapping of IHT cost categories to the Global Fund and WHO categories, which users can review and revise. You can activate the default budget maps by clicking on the Add Default Budget button and selecting which to add from the drop-down list, and then clicking the green check mark to confirm your selection. In this example, I am selecting the WHO TB data reporting option. Each budget map will have a series of cost categories within it, which can be seen by clicking the arrow to the right of the name. In this case, you can see the categories ranging from laboratory infrastructure to drug-susceptible TB drugs to operational research. For the National Strategic Plan for TB and the customizable budget map, users will need to enter the categories for their plan. There are no defaults since those will be so variable by country. To add categories, select the budget map and the arrow to see categories, and then click the button to add budget categories. In this example, I am adding objectives for the National Strategic Plan. You can also set up a custom budget map by clicking the Add Custom Budget button and naming your new budget map. At that point, you can add your budget categories and proceed with the mapping, just as I showed earlier for the National Strategic Plan for TB. Funder mappings follows a similar process. You can set up a series of funding sources and then identify which funder is anticipated to fund each line item. There is a default to customize map preloaded, or you can set up custom lists in the same way that we did for budget maps, by clicking on Add Custom Funder Mapping, giving the new map a name, and listing the funding sources. Once you have set up your budget maps and funding sources, it is time to assign IHT cost categories to these country-tailored categories. You will do this by proceeding to the section called Map Budget Categories and Funding Sources. When you click on the pencil to edit this section, you will see all your active budget maps and can select which one to work on. Select the section to work on at the top of the editor and the budget map below. In this example, I will start with Intervention Costing and the WHO TB data reporting map. When you click on the arrow for a budget map, it will open an editor where you can assign the IHT costs to your budget map and funding sources. If you have multiple funding source lists, you will see them at the top of the editor and can select which one to work on. Budget mappings have been preloaded for the Global Fund and WHO TB data reporting selections. Since categories are fully user-defined for the National Strategic Plan and customizable options or custom budget maps, you will need to do all the mapping as well as all the funding source selection. You can use the drop-down menu for each line item to assign it to a budget map category and funding source. You can also use aggregate options at the top to speed up the process. For example, if I want to assign everything in this editor to one funding source, I can tick the box at the top to assign all to one funding source and then make my selection. In this case, I will assume that the costs of consumables are being paid for by external sources. If you want to assign a line item to multiple budget categories or funding sources, click on the cogwheel to the right and select the categories and distribution across them. For example, if I want to assign half of the costs of TB preventive treatment to external sources and half to domestic, I click on the cogwheel, select those sources, and then assign the distribution between the two. Non-default items like custom program support activities or new interventions will not be mapped when you open this editor. You will need to make sure to map these even when using a default map. Each of the different types of costs, for example, program support costs can be mapped at section, subsection, or activity level if you need more granularity. The indicator type on each editor will inform you about the types of costs to be mapped and the level of detail for that cost category. As you move through the mapping process, you can examine your progress and the distribution by clicking on the View Graph button at the bottom of the editor. It will show the budget mapping of all the cost categories, not just those in the editor where you are working. You can see more detail in the full results for the tool, where you will find the results both for the budget mapping as well as the funding sources. Both results can be shown as a table or a graph, and you can select the specific budget map and funding source list to present in the cogwheel, along with currency, whether to include inflation, and the time frame. Thank you for viewing this demonstration video. If you have any questions or problems, please reach out using the Contact Us button for support.